Good afternoon, and welcome to our continuing series, Interviews with Disciples and Devotees. Today we are again with Kittu, Reddy, and the ideal of human unity.
Third chapter.
Namaste. Third chapter. Okay. Did we finish the second? I thought we were still in the second.
Might be I'll give you a quick.
I think so. A little overview.
In the second chapter, the basic idea, two ideas, is that if a unit has to be harmonized, united and strong, since we individuals belong to many subgroups of that larger unit, our basic loyalty must be to the largest unit.
Right.
Because there can be strife between a small unit and a big unit. What you call provincialism and regionalism versus the nationalism. And ultimately nationalism versus internationalism. So that is why this idea is important. The second idea is that nature is very clear that although there are inevitable and even sometimes desirable inequalities in the society, because some are more capable, some are more advanced, some are stationary, some are even going backwards, but the ultimate aim of nature is to bring about a fundamental equality. And therefore, his advice to all those who are dominating, either because of power or because of capacity or because of anything else, they should try to pass on that knowledge or share that power with the rest of society. Because nature ultimately aims at what he calls a fundamental equality. And he is very clear that absolute equality is neither intended nor possible, but a fundamental equality which will render the play of true superiority and difference inoffensive. I don't know if you have understood the meaning. In a society, inevitably, some are superior to some others in certain qualities. That superiority must not be offensive.
Okay.
Because they must not be arrogant, they must not look down on others, right? On the contrary, they should help these to come up to the level that they are capable of. So, he says, which will render the play of true superiority and difference inoffensive, is essential to any conceivable perfectibility of the human race. If that sense of arrogance and superiority is there, you can never have human unity. See, now this leads to a certain inevitable conclusion or consequence. When one is living in the physical, vital and mental level, inevitably there will be superiority. I am much more physically endowed than you. I am vitally much more powerful. I am mentally much more intelligent. But if this superiority becomes offensive, how can you have unity? Therefore, you must have moved to the next level. You must become spiritual. When you are spiritual, then you, although you are superior to all others, you don't feel superior. You try to, because you become part of them. So this sentence can be realized only, ultimately, by graduating towards spirituality.
So at the present time, when we have the money of the world in very few hands, how are they going to change?
Either the attitude has to change, or there will be struggle and perturbations and upsetting and all that. You see, and he is very clear that if this is not the way, there is no other way. So all these external methods of bringing about unity will not work. Not that they should not be done. They should be tried. But all the time remembering that the inner thing is much more important than the outer thing. So invest the outer thing with the inner qualities. And that is impossible unless one becomes spiritual. And on the collective level, that is the only reason why Mother says, Sri Aurobindo says, that India has to do it. Because India is the one nation that has still preserved its spirituality. As of now, it is not at that level. But when we reach that level, which we have to sooner or later, right? Then, without arrogance, without that sense of superiority, taking everybody into your fold, however weak you are, however backward you are, and raising you, and that is exactly what Mother did in the ashram. Superior sadhaks, inferior sadhaks, right? That word, Sri Aurobindo said, should be removed. Because you are superior by half an inch, it doesn't make you superior. So you are all seekers and we are at different stages of.
But it seems that only this next ascent to a higher man is the possibility.
That is the only ultimate solution. Right?
Yes.
And that is why when you look at this problem from this point of view, Sri Aurobindo was in politics. And he was involved in so much external activities in order to change. When he realized, after going to the Alipur jail and those major spiritual realizations, that this will not take us very far, then he shifted completely and moved the whole thing inwardly. So he was very politically active even after 1910. But it was all from inside. Intervening with his force and change. Intervening when there was an emergency. But the real problem was human nature. And that to be changed and to be brought up to a higher level of consciousness, the over mental was not enough. That's why the rest of his life he dedicated to the descent of the supermind. And now that the supermind has descended and is on earth, any genuine, sincere seeker can come in contact with that and his progress will be much faster. But genuine, sincere is the basic quality. So now on the political plane, he says, therefore, the perfect counsel for a dominant minority is always to recognize in good time the right hour for its abdication and for the imparting of its ideals, qualities, culture, experience to the rest of the aggregate or to as much of it as is possible. So you see, dominance will not be tolerated for long. For some time it is necessary. Today the United States is a dominant power. And there are times when it is very justifiably intervening in certain other areas of the world. Right? But the ultimate aim must be not to always intervene, but to solve the problem, make them solve their own problem, and try to help them to come up.
And especially not to be isolationist.
It has to be?
Not to be isolationist.
No, not at all. No. Today the world is connected, the world is interdependent. You cannot be isolationist.
Yeah.
That does not mean that you are not nationalist. You can remain nationalist and at the same time be internationalist, right? Because the nation is a soul, and that entity has to be preserved at all costs. So this is one of the problems that he's going to bring up here during the course of the book. That when you have such a large group, you cannot remove these national entities. And in the nation, again, there are smaller units. You cannot remove them. But they must not become obstacles to the larger unity. So this demands a continuous balancing. And that has been manifested by Great Britain by moving out of the European Union because they felt that their nationalism was being somewhat threatened. Because 28 nations of Europe, decisions were being taken, even on trade and other things, by a small group of people sitting at Belgium, Brussels. That they didn't like. At the same time, you must admit that the European Union is a step forward. But it is a halfway step forward. Because the European Union must not dominate. European Union must prepare itself for the next step, which is World Union. So continental unions might be a very good step, but a halfway house. The ultimate aim is world unity.
What about the attempt at various countries for independence?
I didn't get it.
The attempt of various countries for independence, such as Catalonia, Spain.
See, now that is a very complex problem. Because I was discussing with an American lady, 2 chapters later, Sri Aurobindo says that the nation is immortal. You can try as much as you want to break it up. It will come back. It is a real unit. While a political unit, you try as much as you want to bring it together, it will break up. The question now is Catalonia a genuine part of Spain? Or is Catalonia artificially brought into Spain? So I had this problem. So I went to the net, and if you look at the very recent Spanish history, you will find it was a dictatorship. Very brutal.
Very brutal.
See, now how can a dictatorship... And secondly, Catalonia was not part of Spain 200 years back. It was brought in by force. Therefore, Catalonia might be... Now this is a very difficult subjective judgment that you have to make. Does Spain, along with Catalonia, have a soul? Or Spain minus Catalonia has a soul? Which means that Catalonia also has got a soul.
Yes, yes.
And it is much easier to understand that for us Sri Aurobindonians. Does Pakistan have a soul? It's a separate country. Because it does not have a soul, therefore its soul is with India, it has to merge with India. That's an inevitability. But the question is how to decide that. Who is to decide that Pakistan has no soul? Right? So Ramchandra Guha says no, nonsense. Some other people will say something else. Some people feel, but then you can't argue and prove to anybody that Pakistan has no soul. So this is a very, very major difficulty.
But we can go with Mother's statements.
No, we are disciples of the Mother.
We are fine.
So we are lucky.
Very.
Right. But others, they have a major problem.
Yeah.
And especially what is now known today as the intellectual liberals, they doubt everything, they question everything. So this morning itself I was seeing an interview with a gentleman called Sadhguru, bearded.
Sadhguru, yeah.
And he was explaining very clearly that how can a nation exist merely as a piece of land and some people? There has to be emotion. There has to be feeling. Why should you die for that? When that feeling comes, he didn't use the word soul, but he almost came to that. You see, because soul is not accepted by the modern intellectuals. So he brought in this. Right?
Chapter 3.
So he says we have to bring about this
Yeah.
equality, right? And by coming down from. So I'll read this first paragraph. It's very important because it is very fundamental. It's a constant method of nature when she has two elements of a harmony to reconcile. To proceed at first by a long continued balancing, in which she sometimes leans entirely on one side, sometimes entirely to the other, at others to correct both excesses by a more or less successfully temporary adjustment and moderating compromise. Now, if you bring it to the individual level, your level and my level, all the virtues that we have got, what we call qualities, is a charitable man. He's a patient man. Now, charity and patience carried beyond a certain point become a defect. If you are so charitable that you can allow anybody to walk into your house and break up everything and right, I am charitable, it's a disaster. So constant balancing has to take place. So this is a very major problem that is there in all human beings. Because the miserly man and the other man who spends a lot. Now both have their plus points, but both can have also their negative points. The continual balancing of these two elements, right? And no human being escapes this. Right? So if you are patient beyond a point, you might be harming the work. If you are too impatient, then again you are harming the work. So constantly, in other words, on the level of virtues which belong to the mental plane, higher mind, there can never be perfect harmony. You have to go higher up still. Alright? So the two elements appear then as opponents, necessary to each other, who therefore labor to arrive at some conclusion of their strife. Right? So you see, actually in work you will always see this. This element and that element balancing. But as each has its egoism and that innate tendency of all things which drives them not only towards self-preservation but towards self-assertion in proportion to their available force, they seek each to arrive at a conclusion in which itself shall have the maximum part and dominate utterly if possible, or even swallow up entirely the egoism of the other in its own egoism. So now this happens on the very large scale by saying communism versus democracy. They are not opposites. If you look at the deeper elements of communism, it stresses on equality, which is very important. If you look at the deeper elements of democracy, it stresses on liberty, which is also very important. Continual balancing between liberty and equality. Too much liberty, there will be no equality. In order to bring about equality, I have to take away liberty. So these two are always striving. And that was exactly the root cause of the conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union. Both of them have come today towards a middle path almost. America is more on what is known as the right, Soviet Union, Russia is more on the left, but now they have a meeting ground. At that time they had no meeting ground. So this is a very important concept. So both individually and collectively, it's a constant balancing between two apparently opposite factors. Thus, the progress towards harmony accomplishes itself by a strife of forces and seems often to be no effort towards concord or mutual adjustment at all, but rather towards the mutual devouring. Right?
Yes.
I'll devour you or
Yes.
you will devour me.
Yes.
Extreme positions. Now see the next sentence. Very beautiful. In effect, the swallowing up not of one by the other, but of each by the other, so that both shall live entirely in the other and as the other, is our highest ideal of oneness. Now this is, in other words, another language, the true meaning of love.
Yes.
Then you are not only living as the other, but you are living in the other. And the same thing on the other side. So this is a very important secret. You want to be like Sri Aurobindo? Live in him.
That's what Mother says.
Huh?
Mother says it.
So you have to live in him.
Yes.
And he will live in you.
Yes. Yes.
There is no other way. Identification of consciousness, which means love. So on Thursday class, I always tell them that look, you have read the books of Sri Aurobindo, but you know nothing about Sri Aurobindo, his life. Now, when you love someone, you know everything about that someone. Is it true or not? When somebody falls in love with a girl or anybody, he finds out all the details of that person. So we are reading the biography of Sri Aurobindo. And now they are beginning to fall in some kind of love with him. Otherwise they were reading him, very nice, very good, philosophically very first class. But they say, oh my God, this is how he behaved. You put him in jail and absolutely no disturbance, right? Etc., etc. Then you say, my God, if he's so good, I must be like him.
Are you referring to the ashram as a whole?
Where?
Are you referring to the ashram as a whole?
Regarding what? Loving Sri Aurobindo?
Yes.
Or loving each one?
Loving Sri Aurobindo.
Yes, and if you love Sri Aurobindo, and if I love Sri Aurobindo, you will see that I love you.
Yes. Yes.
Because we have got a common point of...
Yes. Yes.
So always Mother encouraged relationships, but with the ultimate idea that it must be either through the Mother or through Sri Aurobindo. But if you come down, then there is a separation, right? Then all the physical, vital, mental elements come in. But if you can love everybody through her or through him, which means that first you have to love him or her, become part of them, and then if you also do the same thing, automatically you join up together. So it is the last ideal of love, at which strife tries ignorantly to arrive. When there is strife, there is difference. We fight. But we are trying to arrive at that same thing, with the next sentence. For by strife one can only arrive at an adjustment of the two opposite demands, not at a stable harmony. A compromise between two conflicting egoisms and not the fusing of them into each other. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, by strive, we come to a compromise. You this much, I this much. But actually, neither is satisfied. You get only small share, or what you consider not a reasonable share. But it is a practical way of getting things done. But the other one is the fusing of each into the other. Your happiness is my happiness, your sorrow is my sorrow, and reverse. Correct? Now, that on a larger scale is very difficult, but on a smaller scale might be possible. And in the ashram, I'm taking the ashram as a small unit, we should love each other through the mother
Yes.
and through Sri Aurobindo. For that, I have to love mother, you have to love mother, and then we love each other through the mother.
Yes.
So, all the conflicts that are taking place here, small or whatever it is because of the lack of this. Complete adhesion to the mother, and everybody else also should be having the same adhesion. But because it is partial, therefore all the conflict. There is only one solution.
Yeah.
Move to that level. Still, strife does lead to an increasing mutual comprehension. Because when I fight with you, I know your position. You know my position. So there is an increasing mutual comprehension, which eventually makes the attempt at real oneness possible. You see, I can completely ignore you. You can go to hell. There is no chance of unity. I fight with you. I know your point, you know my point. At the beginning it will be unpleasant, then it will come to a compromise, and then might be it will come to a higher thing. But by ignoring and keeping away, you can't solve problems. So today the world has become globally interdependent. Nothing that happens in any part of the world, or everything that happens in any part of the world, affects in a big way or a small way what is happening elsewhere. Affects the nation,
Sure.
affects the small community. Right? A law passed in India, ashram can't say we are not bothered about it. Whether you like it or not, it has to be followed. Correct? Or we have to have a discussion with them. We will come to know each other. Right? They will understand our viewpoint, we will understand their viewpoint. Then might be a harmony or a compromise can take place. So strife is one of the ways, one of the unpleasant ways by which we come to know each other. But if we ignore them completely, then you live in your own fool's paradise. But now when there is dependence and interdependence, you cannot ignore that. Because this community is part of Pondicherry, this community is part of India, and this community is part of humanity. So Sri Aurobindo does not belong to the ashram. He does not belong to Pondicherry. He does not belong to India. He does not even belong to humanity. He belongs to the divine. And so he is the possession of everybody, if you desire to possess him. All right?
This is an essential.
Essential, absolutely.
Yes.
So now he gave you a general thing. in the relations between the individual and the group. This constant tendency of nature appears as a strife between two equally deep-rooted human tendencies, individualism and collectivism. Now this has become one of the most important problems that is being tackled everywhere in the world. Every community, big or small, is facing this problem, individualism and collectivism. Too much collectivism, individualism is suppressed. Too much individualism, the collectivism doesn't benefit. It might be harmed also. So he's giving you, on one side is the engrossing authority, perfection and development of the state. On the other, the distinctive freedom, perfection and development of the individual man. Individual man goes in a certain way. The collectivity wants to impose another way. Everywhere this problem is there. And I won't go into any detail except to say that after the mother's departure, who harmonized these two elements perfectly, there have been problems here.
Absolutely.
Between collectivism and individualism. And the engrossing authority, the word that he has used, development of the state, that means of the organization, is the natural tendency of those who are in power.
Sure.
Engrossing. On the other hand, the individual wants his freedom. And he says, I don't agree with you. There, when mother was there was no problem. I won't say there was no problem. I will say this much, that when there was difference of opinion and mother took a position, sometimes even when we did not agree or agree because we did not understand, we still said it. She knows better. But nobody will say that to me, that I know better than them, if I am the authority,
Yes.
So this is a continual balancing that has to take place. And without going into details, as I said, look at any problem in the ashram today, you will find that this is exactly the problem.
Yeah.
And if you understand this on a small scale, you will understand this on a larger scale. You see, that's why this book is very important. It always deals with fundamentals. And those fundamentals, whether you have 20% or 2,000 to 2 million or 200 million, it is the same. Because it is the principle. So, the state idea, the small or the vast living machine, and the human idea, the more and more distinct and luminous person, the increasing God, stand in perpetual opposition. The state idea and the individual idea. Now, this is a principle, but both of them can be misused. For example, freedom of speech. That is individualism. I have every right to say anything about anybody, even if I belong to the community. Correct? Now they say the state says no, because you are creating hatred, you are creating anti-national movements or anti-movements against the collectivity. So these are the two opposites that facing each other. Everywhere it is happening. In the ashram it is quite strong. Small society, so it is not so visible. Outside it is huge. So, the size of the state makes no difference to the essence of the struggle, and need make none to its characteristic circumstances. It was the family, the city, it became the clan, the caste and the class. It is now the nation. Same problem, at different levels, but the problem is the same. So there is a young man, only son of his parents. He wants to stay in the ashram and not get into the normal domestic life and to look after his parents and grandparents. He has got a so-called higher aspiration. He wants to live his individual life. They say, no, it is your duty to come and look after us, to serve us. And there is one girl who comes to my class on Thursdays. She loved the class. She used to come regularly. Suddenly she had to go. Her father fractured his thigh bone. She is gone. That day they talked to her in the class itself. She said, Kittu, I am missing the class enormously. But I am reading all the time. And I am hoping that I will bring him here. Then I can do both. Right? I can look after him and I also, but he has to be fit to travel. It will take a little more time. I'll bring him, I'll bring my mother, I'll bring a lady who looks after him all the time. So you see, now this struggle is going on. Because her father is well disposed, otherwise you would say, no, you're not going there. You must be only with me. So these are the two opposite things. So it is a family, the tribe, it is now the nation. Tomorrow or day after tomorrow, it may be all mankind. But even then the question posed between man and humanity, between the self-liberating person and the engrossing authority and collectivity is always there. Every collectivity has got this problem. Engrossing authority and a self-liberating individual. Only solution is to rise above. Intermediate solution is to somehow solve the problem. Don't let it go beyond control. So this is the whole thing.
Maybe a good
Huh?
place to stop.